Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. When we get into the text, we're going to be starting on page, and if you have the little booklet, page 54. Otherwise, it's early on in chapter 11, and the words begin with the paragraph, Ve'ein hakadosh baruch hu chafetz ela be'emunah. Well, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. First, a couple of Boker Tov introductions. First of all, as always, in Shirs Le'ilu Nishmat Avigdor Chayavram ben Meir Tzvi Rachalea, Shamash Devin Aliyah. In addition, today it's also Le'ilu Nishmat Gershon ben Yitzchak Meir Zichrono Livracha, father of Adina Kishel. And also, on a personal note, there's a man I daven with almost every morning up at the Sephardi Shul, fine gentleman named Chaviv, who's one of these old world Jews from Morocco, wherever he's originally from. He's in the hospital in bad condition with corona. Chaviv Chai ben Chatun. Yesharim Shalema. Okay. What did we do last week? We entered Parak Yud Aleph, and we started talking about the fact that, yes, when it comes to big things, we're aware, we know what's going on, and we don't do them wrong. And the things that are big that we're supposed to do, we do. Where do we tend to not necessarily do the right thing or get sucked in the wrong area are the little things, the derivatives of the big things. And he starts off, he's going to deal with multiple issues in this chapter. That's why it's so long. The first one he deals with is theft. And he says that whereas that people, vast majority of people are not guilty of direct theft, but there is still connection to theft one way or another. And one of the examples he gave had to do with people's jobs. And when they're working and they're supposed to be doing their work and they're doing other stuff and they're doing personal things. And again, in most situations, in a regular situation where the person's a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, whatever their job might be, it's assumed, it's accepted business practice that there's going to be some time where the person is going to be doing some personal, may have to make a phone call, may have to do some things, but whatever it is, but it's not where it takes over your life and that takes over the job. That's already stealing from your employer. And what I want to share with you is one brief idea here from Rav Aviner in his book on Mesilat Yesharim. Take a look at the screen. I'll read this to you. He just since finished talked about the idea that if a person is working, and while they're working, they're making phone calls to raise money for tzedakah, for example, that is not only is it not a mitzvah, it is also an avera, and that which should have been his advocate in Shemayim, meaning collecting tzedakah, becomes his accuser because he did it on the cheshbon of his employer's time. Klomar, I will say mitzvah haba b'avera, a person who does a mitzvah by doing an avera, the avera here, the sin here would be taking time from the employer that you're supposed to be working for, that he's paying you, and using it for your own personal time. Umera Yerushalmi, it says in the Gemara Yerushalmi, lozot bilvad shamitzvah eina mitzvah. It's not enough. It's bad enough that the mitzvah is not considered a mitzvah. It becomes and considered in Shemayim as an avera. His advocate, meaning the mitzvah that should have been on his behalf in the Shemayim, becomes his accuser. As we've seen before. This person, when he's supposed to be working, instead of working at avodato, he's doing mitzvot. What is he doing? He's sitting there learning Torah, he's davening, maybe saying a little tehillim. But rather, those actions are actually considered an avera. Zagezel zman, you're stealing time. Because he is sold for those hours. What does that mean? It's an expression. It means that hour, if you're being paid 50 shekel an hour to, obviously you're not in high tech, but you're being paid 50 shekel an hour or 60 shekel an hour to do an action, and you're not doing it because you're too busy sitting there saying Tehillim, or you're catching up on davening, or you're learning Parshat Shavua. Very nice, big tzaddik you are, but you're also stealing from your employer. You're stealing his time, and therefore you're stealing the money that you're making from that person. On the surface, it would seem by sitting there learning, I'm at my job and I'm sitting there learning Parshat Shavua, I should be making Hashem happy. He's being involved in mitzvot in the time of his job. Isn't that mitzvah worth more than that the job? Efshar sheken, maybe. What does God want? Hashem wants emunah. Now, emunah we normally translate as faith, that we trust in God, we have faith in God. But here he takes the same shorish for a different meaning. Emunah kan, when it says emunah here, b'muvan shel aminut and ne'emanut, trustworthiness and believability. This person is reliable. Hashem is looking for people who are trustworthy to be working when they're supposed to be working. Ne'emanut kolelet dvarim elyonim nosafim. Adam amin. Yes, ne'emanut takes into consideration many things, including trust in God and faith in God. But first and foremost, be a trustworthy individual. Zot hashela shesholim et adam biyom hadin. This is the question that person is asked after 120 years. This is the first question. I'm going to expand on this in a minute. Nasata v'natata be'emunah. Did you serve Hashem faithfully? Did you deal faithfully in business? And only then do they ask about Torah. The first thing you're being asked about is your reliability, your integrity, and you're being straight and honest in your honesty. So what's this Gemara? What's this about? Let me fix this here. Many years ago, I gave a speech on, I remember it was Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and I said, and I've used this example before, maybe even in this class, that if you were going to, I know I did, if you were going to be taking a test, what would be the best way you could prepare? So the best way you can prepare, in theory, is to have the test in advance. You know what the questions are. And in a sense, we all have that option, because after 120 years, when we go before the Kisei HaKavod, we go before Hashem, we already know the first few questions we will be asked. The very first one is what he just quoted. Nasata v'natata be'emunah. Did you deal faithfully in business? Only next are you asked, Kavata itim l'Torah. Did you set aside time to learn Torah? By the way, everyone here is, because whether you're here just for Mesilat Yesharim, or you're Mesilat Yesharim and you do the Navi class, and or you do the Tanya class, or you go to other things, or you set aside time to learn Halacha Yomi, whatever it might be, you're Kovei Eitim. So you got yourself you got a good check mark. But that's only the second question. The first question is, did you deal faithfully in business? Of all the questions you could be asked, why is that the first? Because that is where you really show your true faith in Hashem or not. Because when we talked about this, he talked about this at the beginning of this particular chapter and the prior one, that when it comes to money, people are blinded. People see things differently. People make up heptarim for themselves. They decide that, oh, it's, as he said, l'harviach shani. It's different when you're trying to make a buck, when you're trying to make a profit, then you can allow yourself to do certain things, which means that you can have the biggest talit with the darkest blue tchelet on the tzitzit fringes. You can put on 2 different pairs of tefillin. You can shuckle your brains out when you're davening. You can come home and learn daf yomi, and you can do all those things. Then when you leave your house, you leave the Beit Midrash, you leave the shul, and you go and you cheat someone in business, then you're not acting as a religious Jew. What does that mean, religious Jew? You're not following Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, as I told you, is 4 sections, not 3. The one, the Choshen Mishpat, which is what deals with business practices, for example, is critically important because it really shows who you are deep down. It's easy to sit, it's easy for me to come home here and sit at my table and take out a Gemara and learn. Easy, in quotes. It's easy, right? But I'm going to try and do a deal, halavai. I'm going to do a $1 million deal. Look, money blinds a person. There's a famous Hasidic story, which I'm sure you've all heard, but it really fits here. That let's see if I'm going to get it right. Yeah, it's the difference between a mirror and a window. That someone came to an individual to try to convince him to donate money to some institution. And he said, look, he can't. I just don't have the wherewithal to give you much more than I've given you already. And the man who came knew this guy had a ton of money. He said, let me ask you a question. You really think that you giving me an extra X amount of money is going to hurt you? Yeah, I do. He says, I need it. He says, come over here. He looked out the window. He said, what do you see outside? He says, I see people walking. I see people walking with their babies. I see people going to school. Right. So now come over to the mirror. What do you see? He says, I just see myself. He says, what's the difference between the mirror and the window? He says, now, if you know this, but how do you make a mirror? Mirror is glass, and they put a very thin covering of silver behind it. I used to work for a company, actually, that one of the things they did, but said mirrors out to then make them glass out to make mirrors. So it put a thin layer of silver behind it. And that's what you're really looking at, is the silver. He says, as soon as you put silver in front of you, that's all you see. You just see yourself. You see your money. You see you. But when you take away the silver, when you move that away and you're able to look out through the window, you could see other people. Isn't that beautiful? I just absolutely love that mashal. Absolutely beautiful. And it fits here so perfectly. By the way, this is one of the reasons I love teaching, because I had no intention of saying that story, but it popped into my head while I'm in the middle of teaching. And it's just great. That's the beauty of this. Okay, so now let's take a look. We're going to look at a couple of paragraphs.
1 minute.
Yes.
When I was working in Manhattan, there were many Mincha minions in the various office buildings throughout Manhattan. Is that Gezel Zaman, or is that just personal time, 10, 15 minutes?
Right, it's an excellent question. Again, if it is something that is that you're okay, that your employer would be okay with, knowing whether he's religious, not religious, Jewish, not Jewish, doesn't make any difference. As long as that is considered part, first off, you do it on a lunchtime, perfectly fine, perfectly legal. But if it's not a lunchtime and it's okay with the employer, then it's absolutely fine. Where it becomes a problem is where you decide that you're going to, instead of mincha, let's say, is 15 minutes in this little minion off to this down the hall. You decide you're going to go down the street to the shtibel, and then you're going to daven along Shemona Esrei, and now it's, instead of 15 minutes, it's 40 minutes. And then, but don't forget, you have to stop, get your coffee, and talk to the guy coming up the stairs. When it starts to snowball is the problem. But the actual Ikar Mincha itself, as long as it's understood, whether you're doing it on your own time, that's absolutely no problem. It's being done on their dime, that you need to have the okay from the boss to be able to do it. Otherwise, it is problematic. Yeah, that's correct. Good question. Okay, so let's take a look at the text now. Again, page 54 in the little booklet, and it is paragraph that begins with the words "Ve'ena kadosh baruch hu chafetz ela be'emunah." This is what we just quoted a minute ago from Rav Aviner. Ve'ena kadosh baruch hu chafetz ela be'emunah. God really, what does he ultimately want? Honesty. That's what Hashem wants. And now he quotes a few psukim. I'm just going to quote them. V'cheinu omer emunim notzer Hashem. And it says, Pitchu Sharim v'yavot goy tzadik shomer emunim. And it also says, and finally, all these ideas are the idea that Hashem looking at. What does that mean, looking at? Hashem looking for, he's seeking out the person to be honest, true, trustworthy. I have a line I've used with my kids when they were growing up. I've actually had this discussion with parents over the years. It's like, how do I know to trust my kids? So I had I don't know if this was my own approach or I heard about it many, many years ago. And I have this approach with everybody, not just my kids, but it was specifically started with them. I trust you until you give me a reason to not trust you. And when that happens, you need to earn that trust back. When you take that away, it's very hard to regain that trust. And that colors a lot of things. We all know people who, the old line, I'm from Chicago, the old line was that when you count, after you shake this guy's hand, you had to count your fingers afterwards. It was so cold in Chicago the other day that I saw an alderman with his hands in his own pocket. So, so all these different things, it's just, when it comes to honesty and integrity, where we most come across it, unfortunately, where the intersection of, that's a terrible word to use nowadays, but the intersection of trustworthiness and money is where you really see and test someone's mettle, mettle, as to really if they are trustworthy. V'af Eov. Now, you know the story of Eov, or Job, that God had kind of made a deal with the devil, so to speak. The Satan said that he could get Eov to reject God and to turn his back on God. And Hashem said, I'll tell you what, here's the deal. You can do anything you want. You can't kill him, but you can do anything you want. You can make him sick. You can make him physically disfigured. You can have his children, his family die, but you can't kill him. And we'll see if he rejects me. And it's a very sad book. And by the way, parenthetically, the Gemara discusses if Eov ever existed, or if he did exist, was the book actually a true story, or just one giant mashal? I have read through it. I can't say I enjoyed it. It's a very heavy sefer of Tanakh, but it's worth it on a Yom Kippur, not a Yom Kippur, Chas v'Shalom, on a Tisha B'Av or any other sad event in life. It's worthwhile reflection. But Eov even said about himself. He made a comment about himself as follows: Im tita ashuri mini haderech v'achar einai halach libi v'chapi uv'chapai davak me'um. So what did he say? He says, I turned my feet have turned from the, I'm just going to read the English. Have it written down. Where is it? Here. Have my feet turned from the path? Has my heart walked after my eyes? Has anything adhered to my hand? So the point in here is it's a rhetorical question that he's saying about, have I done this? Have I done this? Meaning, no, I haven't done any of this. And the last thing he said in this list of things he didn't do was that nothing adhered, nothing stuck to his hands. What does that mean? So Ramchal says, take a look at this amazingly beautiful mashal, this metaphor, this parable. Ki dima hagazel habilti nigle kidavar mitabek biyad adam. What it does is it compares the idea that something that was unintentionally stolen is compared to something that sticks to your hands. Even though you didn't originally intend to take something, to steal something, it's stuck by itself to your hand. Sof biadohu. Nevertheless, it still is in your hands. You know, like you got with the expressions to have sticky fingers, right? Kena davar hazeh. So too is it true when it comes to the concept of nikiyut. Sha'af shelo yiyadam holech v'gozel mamash. Even though a person, we've said, vast majority of people don't go, religious or not. Because a person is not religious doesn't mean they're not ethical, right? We can't say that, chas v'shalom. But vast majority of people do not steal. Nevertheless, it's very difficult to say that you're truly clean from anything related to the concept of theft. Again, of taking something that's not yours, not necessarily a physical object. It could be time. It could be a person's da'at, knowledge. I'll give you an example. What does it mean, gezel da'at? I mentioned it last week. I don't think I translated it. Let's say you come into my house and I know you're coming over. I'm in the middle of watching a movie on Netflix, but because you're coming over, I want to make it look like I'm a Talmud Chacham. So what do? I take a couple svarim, I put them on the table, I open them up, I'm sitting here like this, and you walk in, come in 1 minute, I'll be right with you, right? I wasn't doing anything except watching a movie on Netflix. That's gezel da'at. I'm making you think I'm some tzaddik and some Talmud Chacham, right? It's not true. You can't do stuff like that. It's other things too. For example, lying, which itself is an avera, is a singular avera, but making someone think something without using the words, without actually intentionally lying, is also, like, for example, are you allowed to tell someone that so-and-so is not home when they call? Okay, that's what we call white lie. It also is what would fall into the category of Shalom Bayit. We already know that from Hashem when it came to the story of Abraham and Sarah, when she was told she's going to have a child. We know that you're allowed to tell what we call an English a white lie, to save someone's hurt feelings, to protect Shalom Bayit. But anytime you're doing something to intentionally deceive someone, not necessarily lie to them, but to deceive them, make them think something that's not true, that's a form of gezel da'at as well. Let's continue. Omnam be'emet, lost place. Kol ze nimshach mimashe tachat heyot halev moshel ba'inayim. This is true. Why? Because what happens, the eyes, what you see, are influencing your heart. We say it every day in Shema, which is not just about theft, it's about many things. Right? You see something, you desire it. Notice the heart doesn't see something, the heart desires in a metaphorical sense. What sees it? What's the initial contact? Your eyes. So by seeing it, it has a shlita over your heart. What happens? He doesn't. He tries to justify to himself that which is, something that's nice that somebody else might have. The eyes draw the heart. They try to convince the heart to find all kinds of heterim, all kinds of leniencies and permissions. Look, that's what I said last week. you come home and you find that you had an extra thing of milk in your bag, right? They didn't charge you for it. It wasn't extra. They didn't charge you for it, right? So again, look, they make millions of shekel a year. What's a 5 point something shekel? Big deal. It is no different than coming home with a 5 shekel container of milk or a 5,000 shekel phone. Makes no difference. It's the exact same avera. If you come home, you didn't pay for it, and you knowingly didn't take it back to them, that is theft. It's even worse than this. But again, we make up these things in our head. Therefore, Yov said, Shehu lo kenasa. That's not how he acted. But he didn't allow his heart to be driven by his eyes. Therefore, nothing stuck to his hands in the literal or figurative sense. By the way, just as an aside, that last word me'um is used in modern Hebrew as well, not just in text, but it's used more of me'uma. It's not me'uma, it's me'uma. It means nothing. You'll come across it in Tanakh, but it's something that is mispronounced very often. Next paragraph, where it says Re'ena. Now he dealt until now, this first section, he dealt with, of the many topics, he dealt with theft. He's going to deal now with fraud, which indirectly, of course, relates to theft. He will always also deal with about, let me just look ahead for a second. 1, 2, 3 or 4 more topics that will directly or indirectly deal with theft. He'll change this to different topics after that. But 3 or 4, again, why so much about theft? Because he says that we talked about this expression the Gemara uses, the rubam begazel, that majority of people somehow fall into the trap of theft without even realizing it. Again, you and I don't walk into someone's house or to a store and take something that doesn't belong to us. But one way or another, somehow we have some connection to it, some zika to that. So now the next topic is hona'ah. Hona'ah is fraud. It could be other things too. You can also have onna'a and honna'a, by the way, interchangeable. And it also can be abuse, which we're going to talk about. But the abuse doesn't necessarily relate to the monetary aspect. Like when you say to, God forbid, a person says to their spouse, anybody, but especially their spouse, their child, you're stupid, you can't do anything right. That's verbal abuse right there. That has nothing to do with theft. It has to do with abuse, which is another topic we will get to. Take a look at the issue when it comes to fraud. How easy it is for a person to be seduced by and to trip up when it comes to fraud. For it may seem to the person it may appear proper. Now, I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to qualify it way before he qualifies it because it's going to stick in your head. You're going to go, something's not going to add up here. He says it may appear proper for a person to try to make his product that he's trying to sell look better, more attractive, in order to profit from his labor. In order to speak to his customers or the purchasers. The money tratzelo, in order that they should be persuaded, so to speak, to come and buy from him. And he says to people, Yesh zariz v'niskar, v'yad charutzim ta'ashir. Meaning the person who's zariz, who's quick, like kol hakodem, we say in Hebrew, kol hakodem zocher. First come, first one there is going to be going to get it. Omnam im lo yedaktek v'yishkol ma'asav harbe. But while he's using these phrases and these actions, if he's not careful to weigh his actions, in place of wheat will grow thistles. It's hard to say that. Thistles. It's like thorns. What does that mean? It's an expression. And again, that comes from Eo. That expression means that instead of doing something positive, you're causing damage. You're causing something negative. You're going to trip up and be over the isurim of fraud. That the Torah said you can't do, which says velo tonu ish et amito. A person cannot defraud or abuse his fellow man. Now again, this pasuk has far broader meaning than just fraud in monetary ways. It also, as I say, had to do with abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, mental cruelty. There's a whole long laundry list of this, what this pasuk can teach us. But for now, we're only going to focus at the moment on this meaning having to do with fraud when it comes to business. Even to deceive a non-Jew, to be fraudulent to a non-Jew, is also asur. And it says in the pasuk in Tzvanya, Sherit Yisrael lo yasu avlav lo yidabru chazav lo yimatzeh bifihem lashon tarmit. I'm going to go. I have the English here. Just a minute. Let me look it up. The remnant of Israel. Like sometimes the translation into English is so I don't know, stilted. But the remnant of Israel should do no iniquity, nor speak falsely, nor should there be found in their mouths a deceiving tongue. You're also not allowed to make an old utensil look beautiful like it's new. You also can't mix two different types of fruit, meaning from two different or grains from different locations. Even new stuff with new stuff. Let me just finish this paragraph and explain. Kol ose ele, kol ose avel, meaning that anyone who does any of these is actually doing and acting fraudulently. Karui chamisha shemot, and he's called 5 different names. A person who tries to deceive the public. For example, he's selling in the shuk, he's selling peaches, right? He's selling peaches in the shuk, and he has 40 peaches that are really pretty garbagey, and he has 30 peaches that are in great shape. So he piles them on, or he sells grapes in there in the sal salah little basket. And he has a bunch on the outer part that look beautiful, and inside he's got a bunch of junk. Okay, that is very dangerous to do. It's deceptive. Yes, now in your situation where you can pick out what you want to pick out is a different story, obviously. But a person who purposely goes to fraud somebody, you're selling a used car, for example, and you know that there is a problem with the radiator. Unless you say as is where is, and you're not making any guarantees, that's fine. You could say that, and that's buyer beware. But otherwise, if you make it appear that everything's in good shape, you know the radiator leaks. So what do you do the day before the guy comes to a test drive? You fill the radiator with the water and you cap it and you pray to God that everything's going to be okay. That's fraud. What are you called when you do that? You're called 5 names: aval, sanaui, mishukatz, cherem, and to'eva. What do they mean? You're called iniquitous, hated, abominable, you're excommunicated, and you're despicable. I actually know some people who try to find a shidduch that fall into those categories too. That's a different story. Anywho, you get called all kinds of names. So what's going on here? It sounds like if you're in business and you have product you're putting on a shelf, and the shelf is dusty, that maybe you shouldn't dust it, because then someone would think that, oh, you just put the product out here today, when in fact it's been there for a week or a month. Where's the line here? How do you know what you can do, what you can't do? So let's continue reading and see where is this line of what you can do and when you cannot do. The obvious is you cannot purposely defraud somebody. You may say, well, wait a minute. They paid me for 3 kilos of peaches. They got 3 kilos of peaches. Or he paid me for this 2003 car that had 187,000 kilometers on it. He got a car with 187,000 kilometers. Tough luck, Charlie. But you cannot present something as being what it's not. The Musar Haskel out of that also is who we are as people and who we present ourselves as being. That's another reason why this works into the concept of aminut, or trustworthiness. I can present myself as a nice guy. I get along with people. I teach, but inside maybe I'm not that kind of person. And I'm just, it's a false front. There's a line from Macbeth. I've quoted many times over the years, which says, false face must hide what the false heart doth know. Meaning you got to, put on your poker face and not really play your hand. Why is the face in Hebrew called the panim? Because the panim reflects the pnim. The face on the outside reflects the inside of who you are. And another one of my many pet peeves is when I hear people say, Misrad ha-panim. Okay, there is no ministry of faces. Okay, it's the interior ministry. So it's Misrad HaPanim. Okay, just as an aside. So if you do happen to say Misrad HaPanim, please stop or don't come to my class anymore. Okay, you can still come, just don't say Misrad HaPanim. So let's read one more paragraph and we'll see where he comes up with this idea of how we can really make this distinction. It also we say, if you steal from somebody, even just the equivalent of a pruta, which is pennies, it's as if he's taking his soul. And I'm going to come back to that sentence in a minute. The isur, the prohibition, is grave even on the slightest amount. And what causes rain to stop? Well, we know we say in Shema, we have this whole list of things, but what does tell us in the Gemara and Talmud, that rain stops. It doesn't say rain doesn't come. It says rain stops. I mean, you got the rain, but then it comes to a stop. When people are acting with gezel. And furthermore, they said, if a person comes to heaven after 120 years with a whole crate load of sins, which sin steps up first and says, hey, I have what to say about this guy? Gezel. Okay? We also know that the reason the Dor HaMabul, that the people, the generation of Noach, were destroyed, was specifically for Gezel. Now, let me read this qualifier and then come back to what this first line of the past paragraph. You might say now, after all this, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What's wrong with my trying to tell someone, hey, you should come and buy from me? What's wrong with my trying to say this is a good product and this is great and all that business and extol the virtues of the value of this product? What's wrong with that? Chiluk gadol yesh b'davar. There's a very big difference. Anything you do to show off the true, honest, real value and goodness of this product, that's fine. If I'm selling, I don't have a car. Let's say I'm selling you a car. I can tell you, look, I can tell you the radiator is no good. Fine. But I will tell you that the gas mileage is unbelievable. And I can tell you that the brakes are fantastic. And the trunk space is huge. It's so good. And all that, if it's true, is fine. I have no problem. And it's halachically okay. And I'm not selling you a bill of goods. It's fine. But if you're trying to hide something that's wrong with the object, is prohibited. And by the way, the halacha applies in shidduchim as well. It's a question as to a very well-known question in shidduchim. Let's say a person has either a physical defect, a mental defect, an issue in the family that others may consider being a problematic one that someone may not want to marry into the family, is to when a person who is in that situation needs to disclose. It's not, hi, my name is Tammy so-and-so, and I walk with, I have X, Y, and Z. That's not what's done. But at some point there has to be disclosure, because otherwise what you're doing is you're, quote, selling a bill of goods. You're purporting to be somebody that you're not. Again, this has tremendous ramifications, but right now I want to stay focused on this one topic. This is a strong and hard, fast rule when it comes to working in business and how to be an ethical person. Now, go back for a moment where it said, Odamru zichronam livracha, just the past paragraph, it says, Kol hagozel chavero, the person who steals from his friend, afilu shve pruta, even if it's only worth one pruta, let's say a penny, ki'ilu notel nafsho mimenu. It's like he's taking his neshama. So you should ask yourselves, okay, is that meant as a metaphor? Or actually, I guess it would be a simile because it says like. Okay, maybe that's all it is. Like, wow, you take even the slowest amount, you're taking his neshama away. But what's the connection? Why would that be the way that the Gemara phrases it? So we're going to segue here for a few minutes, if I don't run out of time, into something that, hold on, before I say it, let me just pull it up on the screen. Okay. For those of you who are learning Tanya with me, or have learned Tanya, are learning Tanya on your own, we have not gotten here, but this is in chapter Lamed Zayin, chapter 37, when it talks about the concept of tzedakah and what is the difference between tzedakah and all other mitzvot. For those who are learning Tanya, you're going to get to the topic of Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is equivalent to all other mitzvot when we get to chapter 5. We're only in chapter 4. This is a long way away. This is in chapter 37. And when we get to this chapter, you're going to remember, oh, wow, 10 years ago, remember when we did. No, it's not going to take that long. In any case, I'm going to read the bold is the quote from Tanya, from the Admor HaZaken, the Mishnah Zalman of the Adi, and the regular print non-bold is Rav Steinsaltz's commentary on it. So I'm going to read this and a little bit on the next slide and explain why is it the Gemara says that when you steal a penny from somebody, it's like you're taking their neshama. What does that even mean? Okay, so let's read this. And by the way, there'll be terminology here that even if you don't understand, it's fine, because the point will still be the same. When a person gives tzedakah from his handiwork, he's earned money. Let me just do something here. Let me do this. And never mind. When a person gives tzedakah as having worked, earned money, and gives that tzedakah, mitzvat tzedakah eina mitantzit pe'ulat hanetina shel hakesef litzedakah, sheken bekesef hazeh she'adam noten litzedakah. This action of a person taking money and giving to tzedakah, what is he doing? What does that money represent? Hare kol koach nafsho achiyunit milubash b'asiyat melachto o esek acher shenistaker bo ma'ot elu. How did he get that money? He worked for it. Let's assume he's a laborer. You know, he builds buildings. So he worked for it. He put his mind, his blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak, into earning that money. And when he gives the money that he earned, he gives it to tzedakah. What happens is he's putting almost literally his neshama into that shekel. What does that mean? Mitzvat tzedakah hi hanetina she'adam noten mishalo. First, what's the bottom line? What does tzedakah mean? It means you give something of yours to somebody else. In this case, you give money from yourself, from your pocket, to somebody. The money, here, let me show you something. I'm going to use a visual aid. Okay, here's a shekel, right? So the money, if I give this shekel to tzedakah, is just the edge of a whole series of events. Me'en sikum shel ma'amatzeha u'f'uloteha. This coin represents the end of an action. What was the action? I got up, I went to school, I taught, I came home, I did some more teaching, I came home, and eventually I got a check, or not a check anymore, I got a money deposit into my account. And now I have this shekel in my hand. The money doesn't just express the work of the person's neshama. It also represents all the activities that I did to get that money. There's no one just dropped the shekel in my hand, right? I had to do something in order to earn it. This money, in this sense, means it's a replacement for that person's strength that they expended from their person. This is from my actions, the time I spent, from my life. And at the end of the day, when I give this money to tzedakah, when I put this money in tzedakah, okay, it's only a shekel, but let's assume I give 1,000 shekel. Okay, talk real money. It's not real money anymore. I put 1,000 shekel in tzedakah. That is the consummation of all the time and all the effort and all the koach I put into to earn that money. I'm giving it and giving it away. And that's what that money represents. The more a person worked, the more he put in time and invested time in acquiring that money, the more of your neshama, so to speak, you're giving to tzedakah. That's for a different time. What does this mean? Even if the money was given to you a person received an inheritance, for example. Nevertheless, it still takes on the same quality. Why? Hakesef hu harei shve erech lechol davar. Money you can do something with it. Kasher yesh kesef biyado shel adam. When you have money in your hand, hu yachol lishamesh lechol tzorchei nafsho. If I have 1,000 shekel in my hand, I can do a lot with it, right? I can go to Makolet and buy stuff. I can go to Super Soul. I can go to a restaurant. I can pay for tuition for somebody. I can do a lot with it. But instead, I give the money to tzedakah. He gives the life source of his neshama to Hashem. Meaning, netinat tzedakah hi efo mitzvah. The giving tzedakah, therefore, is a mitzvah. You're not giving this standalone little thing. Here's this shekel, and I put it in tzedakah. It's a consummation and compilation of that person's life, of what he's done to get that shekel to him. It's not just one singular action of a person. You could, if I give this money to tzedakah, right? I give this shekel to tzedakah. That's it. I can't use that shekel anymore. It's gone. I can't use that shekel of the makolet anymore to buy something worth a shekel. I've given it away. But remember that shekel represents all I needed to do in my life. I'm giving away my neshama. But wait a minute. I buy a lulav and etrog, right? What about that? That money's gone. Because what I'm doing is I had gained something out of that. Okay, what do I gain? I'm taking it now. I've inversed that money into a product, and that product now is me to do a mitzvah. When you get into time, we understand more about when you're doing a mitzvah. You're still not just doing it for Hashem; you're also doing it for yourself, and it has a little bit of something attached to it. But the tzedakah is completely altruistic. You're giving it away. There's nothing. You don't get anything from it. You may feel good about it. And by the way, that's one of the other things we will talk about of when you give tzedakah, of how there's still some ego involved in that. But the bottom line is, so now we'll go back to the question I started with. Why does the Gemara say that when you steal even a pruta from somebody, that you're really taking their neshama? It doesn't mean that you're taking this, let's say this is a 1 penny. I'm taking away your whole life because of this. I'm taking away everything you did to earn that little bit of money, and I'm taking it away from you. I've taken away a piece of you. And that's why the Gemara, I believe, makes that statement. Okay, I think I've talked enough for today. Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll continue talking about fraud, and there'll be, like I say, another couple of topics that'll indirectly deal with theft, and then we'll move on to a couple other topics he'll deal with the whole topic of Nikiyut.